Good afternoon and welcome to today's webinar titled It's About Internships, How to Find and Maximize Your Experience, presented by Annmarie Uliano and Christopher Gehrke. This webinar is part of the American Society for Engineering Management, ASEM, Academic Partnership Series. My name is Ona Boy and I'll be moderating the session today. I am the Student Membership Director for ASEM and an Associate Professor in the Department of Informatics and Engineering Systems at the University of South Carolina, upstate. Before we get started, I'd like to go over a few items so that you know how to participate in today's event. This event is being recorded and we plan to make the recording available for viewing. Please turn off your camera and mute your microphones to avoid background noises. You'll have the opportunity to submit questions to today's presenters by typing your questions into the chat box in the control panel. You may send in your questions at any time during the presentation. We will collect these questions and address them during the 25 minutes Q&A session at the end of today's presentation. If you're not currently an ASEM member, please consider becoming one. As an ASEM member, you will receive a discounted rate for ASEM certifications. So please visit the Society's webpage for additional information on how you can become a certified associate in engineering management or a certified professional in engineering management. Student groups can become ASEM members through the Academic Partnership Program, which offers membership to students at a significantly reduced rate. So please visit the Academic Partnership Program website for additional information about the program. Now I would like to introduce today's speakers, Annmarie Uliano and Christopher Gehrke. Annmarie Uliano graduated from Northeastern University with a Bachelor of Science degree in Industrial Engineering in 2015, followed by a Master of Science degree in Engineering Management in 2017 as a Galante Fellow. She's a project manager for Lahey Health Performance Improvement and has managed the department's co-op program. She is also the Director of Communications for ASEM and an ASEM webinar committee member. Christopher Gehrke is currently a student at Northeastern University, where he is pursuing a combined undergraduate and graduate degree in industrial engineering through the Galante Engineering Business Program. He's passionate about applying his skill set to people and services and has done so on his co-ops and internships at Johnson & Johnson, Disneyland, Boston Children's Hospital, and the Healthcare Systems Engineering Institute. Hello, Annmarie and Christopher. Thank you for joining us today.
Thank you, Ona. Thanks for having us. I just wanted to thank you all for allowing me and Chris to be here today and speak to you all. And can you all see the slides here? Okay.
I can, so.
Okay, perfect. Thanks, Chris. So I just wanted to kind of give a little bit more of an intro to myself and pass it over to Chris to tell us more about him. I have been managing the co-op program for my department. And I have experience at Northeastern as an undergraduate co-op and with other internships as well. And so I thought that I could bring a senior, an experienced person to this field, having both been in a number of internships and co-ops, as well as hiring interns and co-ops, and met Chris along the past year, got to know a little bit about his co-op journey and his journey through seeking them out, and thought that he would bring a little bit of a unique perspective here. A little bit more about me is that I I used my systems engineering degree and apply it to healthcare systems. I always wanted medical applications with my engineering degree, and so I initially was pursuing chemical engineering and did 2 related internships through that. The first one was a research experience for undergraduates doing research in the Advanced Drug Delivery Lab at Northeastern. And then I went on to work at Pfizer R&D headquarters as a process engineer. It really crossed into systems and process engineering there. And I had opportunity to sort of pivot when I got back to school after that co-op and moved into industrial engineering. My second co-op was with a medical device manufacturing company, and my last experience was research-based with a professor that does work applying systems engineering to healthcare systems in the Boston area. I still live in Boston. I still work for a major hospital in the Massachusetts area. When I came to the department in 2017, we had a co-op student, and that was really exciting. And from there, I just got involved and have kind of taken it on for my department. So happy to share my experience with you all here today. And I'm going to pass it off to Chris, and he can enlighten you as to how we've met and the journey that he's been on as well.
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you so much. And thank you again for letting me talk here. I'm excited to share my experiences. I, as many students at Northeastern, love to talk about internships and co-ops because it's definitely shaped kind of where I am in my career and where I want to go. So as mentioned previously, I've done a couple of co-ops as an undergrad. I'm currently studying industrial engineering and also pursuing a combined master's degree, also in industrial engineering. And when I started out, I did my first co-op in supply chain because I wanted to figure out if that was something I wanted to pursue. Did that through the Northeastern system of applying to co-ops. That worked out really well, but decided co-op, that wasn't what I wanted to do, supply chain, went into my second one, decided to try something a little bit different, and ended up applying outside of Northeastern's systems to Disneyland through their own application process. Moved out to California, had a great time doing that, and then this time went back and attempted to get myself a co-op in Germany, succeeded, but then wasn't able to go because of COVID. So now I went back, applied through Northeastern system, and now I'm working at Boston Children's Hospital. And so I just figured those experiences all will line up and hopefully be able to shed some light on how I did that. And then beyond that, I go to Northeastern. I'm also involved in like theater when COVID isn't happening, play the saxophone, all that kind of stuff. So a little bit about me, and I'm excited to share some of our experiences.
Thanks, Christopher. Yes, I think along the way, how we met with Christopher reaching out on LinkedIn for an informational interview. Oops, excuse me. Excuse me. Sorry about that. It was clear to me that I think that others could learn from Chris's process, and for those that are not blessed with a co-op structured program or an internship requirement at their university, how you may be able to be creative and go about obtaining some of these opportunities for yourself. So as Yesem had stated, please feel free to put Q&A into the chat, and those will be moderated and brought forth at the end. We're also hoping at the end you all might want to take your cameras off and just have more of an informal conversation with us around starting a co-op program or an internship program, I should say, and if you're a student, how to seek them out. So happy to do that at the end and have a little bit more engagement. So I've already done this slip up, and so this is a perfect slide to lead on. This program has been marketed as an internship. How do you optimize and experience internships? Me and Chris come from a co-op school, so we're probably going to use the word co-op predominantly, but wanted to just keep in mind that there's plenty of other ways of looking at these, whether it be, you know, an internship, a co-op, a research experience for undergraduates are usually a summer-based program, or you can be a research assistant while you are at school working with professors to do research. If you are interested in entrepreneurship, I know plenty of students that have gotten involved in developing their own startup or joining a small team that started with other students off the ground, and they get some great experience there. And then I know that with the pandemic world that we're living in now, you know, some of these more structured programs, particularly, you know, my co-op program at work, we've had to put a little bit of a pause on it. And so how, as a student, can you be creative with gaining experience? And so taking on leadership roles in student groups or through volunteer work, you know, bringing together groups on campus to be able to do this type of work and lead them. And then also another valuable experience besides research with professors is becoming a teaching assistant if possible. So as you're sort of thinking of your various options, there's plenty of considerations in this. For us in the co-op world, we're sort of have an expectation in an engineering co-op world that we're gonna obtain a paid co-op, but for other folks in other parts of the world and country may not have that opportunity. And so when considering if you're going to take a paid versus an unpaid experience, there's plenty of other pros and cons that you can balance out and feed into your decision-making process around taking a particular experience. For me, I had known that I wanted to work in some sort of medical application. And so I took my opportunities and honed in on different applications or industries within the medical field. For Chris, he sort of did allude to his journey where he was more trying out different functions of an industrial engineer, supply chain, moving into ops, moving into different industries. And so really, I think that what it comes down to is what are you trying to gain out of the experience, and what is the value you will get by agreeing to sign on with that internship. That kind of leads into this is your opportunity as an undergraduate or graduate student before you go out into the workplace to really test the waters. So specific roles, project manager versus data analytics versus supply chain, different products or services, different company sizes. So I mentioned startups earlier, considering working at a medium company and then a large conglomerate if you're trying to learn a little bit more about different cultures and structures of organizations, and then location. So I chose to stay in the New England area for all of my co-ops. Chris was going to travel the world with his. And so maybe that's something that you want to loop into your experience in seeking out an internship, is trying the West Coast or trying Europe or just trying a different area. And then some of these on the right here are other considerations that you can make. Some schools offer academic credit or other sorts of, it might be a requirement of sorts where they help you get set up with some sort of experience. You can also consider at this time, especially during COVID, are there any part-time opportunities that you can do during your semester if you can't afford to take off a summer or take off a semester? If you are relocating, are they providing housing or a stipend to move? I heard food could be an added bonus. I haven't gotten that experience, but you know, it's always part of the package, right? What are all the other benefits? And then lastly, just the length of time that you're interested in pursuing. We wanted to put this out there just to beware of scams. So I think for those that are sort of on their own with job search, it's important to kind of just be on the lookout that no organization is going to be taking advantage of you. You know, for an internship, it's really not appropriate to have to be paying a recruiter or an employer for the job. You know, things like earn money fast or asking for personal identification information is not aligned with standard procedures. And so just keeping your eye out. And if you ever have a doubt, you can always just Google the company name with the word scam in it. And then just thinking about timeline for how to, when you should start looking for your internships. And we've come up with some general guidelines from our experience. For me, we seek out the 4 to 6 month spring and fall co-ops. And so those cycles, the recruitment cycles are listed below each of those. And then for the more traditional student that has a summer off and is looking for specifically a summer internship, many large organizations like your Disney, your GE, your J&J, the big corporations are often seeking out interns in the fall ahead of that summer, so October timeframe. And then smaller organizations are starting, you know, in that same fiscal year, the January leading up to that summer. And so from here, I'm going to kind of pass it off to Chris with some of his additional insights on seeking a co-op or internship experience.
Yeah, absolutely. And as someone who's done a couple of those, one of the biggest things I've noticed is just to start early for anything that gets more specific. So like my role at J&J was very much a standard co-op it was at a big company, but there were a lot of roles, so it was very competitive, so I was able to follow the timeline pretty well. However, when I was applying to Disneyland, that was a very highly competitive application process, so I had to start much, much earlier. I started in like February when I was going to start the co-op the following January. And then when I was creating my own internship in Berlin, I also started about a year in advance, starting to network and things like that. So in general, start early for anything that's custom or highly competitive or self-developed. That being said, for things that aren't those, if you find yourself a little bit behind that schedule, it's definitely okay, because there are tons of organizations and companies that will be hiring later than that, or scrambling to find someone because someone, you know, dropped off and found a new role. So don't be discouraged if you're not like exactly in that time frame. So one of the things that I did and that I find very, very helpful is a concept called informational interviews. That's something that, at least at Northeastern, they kind of tell you a lot about when you're learning about co-op. And it's a great way to either develop your own co-op or even get your foot in the door for a co-op that already exists. I did this a little bit for my current role and for the role I managed to create in Berlin. And what this is basically finding a way to just quickly talk to a bunch of people to learn about their industry, their role, and then also to connect to other people. It's basically just networking. And there's a couple ways you can do that. So the first thing to do is to research the industry to find out what type of people might be working there, what the role names might be, what the company looks like, and where it might be located. So anything about the industry, so you can start to look for people. And then with that information, you can start looking for individual people that you're probably already connected to on LinkedIn. So for example, when I was looking for a role in Germany, I looked for people that graduated from Northeastern that lived in Germany. That was where I started. And then from there, you can reach out with some messages. So make sure you introduce, in those messages, you'll want to introduce yourself, explain how you found that person, basically just explain what filters you use to find them on LinkedIn. Give them a compliment about why you think you want to talk to them. Are they really impressive? Are they in a role you like? Do you think that there's someone that you would look up to? And then personalize it to that person. So for example, when I found those people that graduated from Northeastern and worked in Berlin, I was like, hi, you know, my name is Christopher. I found you in looking for Northeastern graduates that are working in Germany. I found you, I think you're super impressive, and I think that I want to do what you're doing. Would you have 10 to 15 minutes to talk about your experience and give any advice? So that reach out you can do as many times as you want. Basically, if your goal is to find a role or to use this process to find a role, you want to reach out to as many people as you can, because not all of them are going to respond. But if you reach out to 30 and 2 respond, that's great. Those 2 people are going to connect you with more people. And then, when you're making this message, don't ask for a huge heavy lift. Don't say like, oh, can you get me a job? Or can you talk to me for 2 hours about like how exactly I should make my resume look? It's a, quick talk, just some advice. And then if you do get that time, just prepare some questions. Like, you could probably Google some and find a whole list, but how did you get your job? Like, do you have any advice for someone who's looking for a job in this location or in this company? What are some skills that you think are really important that I should develop? And don't ask them to do anything that would require them to like ask someone to give you a job. But if you ask like, do you have any advice? And they say, oh yeah, reach out to this person, then you're on your way. And then if they don't, even just keep the relationship, follow up. If nothing else, they become a great friend and someone that you can ask questions to. And as they get to know you more, they might be more willing to help out. So a really, really great way to meet people. It's how I met Annmarie, and kind of how I got my job in Berlin, and the current job I have now. I even met some people that work in the department, and that probably is how I got an interview in the first place. So very, very helpful. And then when it comes to getting an interview, say you either apply and through a normal method get an interview, or you set up a personal one, you're going to have to interview. And I'm sure many of you have heard a lot of tips about this, and I just kind of want to share my perspective. When it comes to your resume, my biggest thing is to just work with as many people as you can to get that looking great. No one's ever going to agree on what it looks like, but you could give it to 10 people, and the 10th person could notice that your name's spelled incorrectly. So it never hurts to have another set of eyes on it. Next is to prepare your elevator pitch. Every interview I've ever had starts with a like, tell me about yourself. And being able to nail that is super, super helpful. So, stand in front of a mirror and do that. Google some tips, try it with your friends, and kind of work on that. And it can evolve as you learn more and do more, but super important thing to have in your back pocket. Also, company research, for the same way you would want to research companies before informational interviews, do it before the actual interview, because they're probably going to ask you questions about why you chose that company, or why you think you'd be a good fit for that company. And knowing some things about their culture or their work methods would be super important to answer that question. Additionally, like having questions for them related to your research would be super cool. I think it's very impressive when someone can ask like, oh, I saw this in the news. Like, how is your department working on this thing, or how is it related to that? And would I be helping with this as well? Being able to show that you really care about the job and like are willing to do the work is impressive, and definitely helps out in an interview. Also, if you have any advisors or mentors, reach out to them, ask them for questions, ask them if they have a few minutes to give you some mock interview questions. Definitely a great resource, because they've gone through this and they know what to look for and can give you some great advice. And then when it comes to answering interview questions, a lot of times you'll get behavioral-based questions, which are like, tell me about a time when you did this, or what is a time that this happened? And this method STAR is a great way to go through that. It's basically just a way to format the way you answer questions. So the S is for situation. You want to set up what the situation of the question was. So if they're asking you to tell me about a time that you solved a difficult problem, you want to say, okay, this was the setup for the problem. This was the problem I was tasked with. This is where I was working, all of those things. A task is what exactly the ask was. So whereas the situation is the overarching context, the task is what explicitly were you asked to do. The action is how did you solve that. So that's where the bulk of it is. What did you do? And then what you really want to focus on is the result. So really think about what happened based on what you did. How did you learn from it? How did you react to it? How did that help your company or you or your stakeholders in the situation? So just having that method is very helpful, and writing out, if you're practicing or like listing all the examples that you think you might mention, writing out all this for each one is a great way to force yourself to think about that a little bit. And then practice. When I was preparing for my latest interview, literally put my phone camera under my laptop screen and Googled like a video of some guy who was sitting there like asking interview questions and like nodding on like as if he was listening to you, and just like answered his questions without preparing for them, just to see if I can think on the spot and answer them in that method. And then I'd watch them back, realize what I did wrong and work on to fix it. And you don't have to do that. Like, you do it with your friend, you can do it in your head, but I think whatever you do, it's super, super important to practice. So then, assuming you get this, you follow all that advice, you follow more advice, you get the job, you definitely want to make sure you use that experience to the maximum. So that's kind of what we want to talk about here, is how to optimize your experience, how to get the most out of it. And there's 4 kind of key pieces we want to talk about. The first one is relationships. You really want to build relationships with people you work with, because they're going to be friends for life, or even like connections for life. So one way to do that is set up one-on-ones right when you get there. A lot of companies will do this well. They'll tell you to set up one-on-ones with everyone, set up a few minutes with everyone you work with. And even if they don't, find some time to talk to everyone, even just for 15 minutes. It's super helpful, and it's a great way to just get to know the people you're working with, which makes it just easier to do your work and easier to make connections. So it's a very helpful thing to do. Similarly, reach out to new people. You're making those connections with people in your department, but if you're working with someone and they mention another department, feel encouraged to reach out to that department, because they might have additional information about something you're interested in that's not directly in that role. So just be encouraged to go out and talk to new people. And in the same vein, networking. Ask them about their past roles. Learn about what their experiences look like, so that you can kind of know who to go for advice, or for recommendations for roles in the future. And keep in touch with all of those people. When you leave, that's something that I think a lot of people struggle with. They'll leave their co-op and they'll never talk to any of their coworkers again. And then they need a letter of recommendation, and it's super awkward to go and reach out to someone you haven't talked to in a year and a half and ask for something. So even just for that reason, it's great to stay in touch, but also because sometimes you forget as an intern that you're allowed to be friends with these people. They might be living in houses with spouses and kids, but they can still be your friends. You can still be really close with them, and you can learn a lot and talk to them outside of the co-op. So that's definitely something to keep in mind, that they are people too, and that you're allowed to be friendly and maintain a connection with them even after you leave.
So I'll pop in here too with some attitude. And one thing I just want to reiterate from all the things that Chris has been saying is how much he is sort of weaved in learning opportunities along the way that are not even closely related to your engineering skill set. Just kind of trying to build your network and be curious and ask people, for their path and their journey. And that alone is so valuable in your learning experiences as you go out and seek internships. In terms of attitude, so I'm coming at this from the co-op manager perspective. And like Chris just said, it's great to build relationships between, for me, with the co-op students coming in. And I believe that they feel that value too. I've had a mix of different co-op managers, and some have been super engaged and others have been not so engaged. And how do you utilize others in the system to be able to perhaps get some of those goals that you intend to get out of your experience? So when it comes to attitude, being friendly and being professional at the same time, but also feeling like you should integrate with the department. Most organizations, consider you, a key resource to their team. So carrying yourself in confidence and like you are a full-time employee, not lowering yourself and thinking that, oh, I'm just an intern, I must just do the grunt work and all of that. Show excitement, seek out additional assignments, and be open-minded to ones that are assigned to you that may not align with what you were hoping to do. You're going to learn something different. In one of my co-ops, I was assigned to a documentation control project. And, that doesn't sound too thrilling for an engineer, but it sort of spiraled and led me and the other co-ops that were there at that time learning some geometrical dimensioning and tolerance kind of techniques with the people that we were helping support. They saw that we were interested in learning more about that, and we were able to gain some additional training and experience. And so just being open-minded to experiences and assignments and tasks that you are provided, because there's always some sort of skill to learn, whether it's a hard skill or a soft skill. So just continue to have a positive attitude throughout the whole process.
And then also, you want to think about what you're doing like in practice. So what do you do on a day-to-day basis to make sure that you're successful and you get the most out of it? Biggest one is to ask questions. A lot of times your employer loves the fresh set of eyes that a co-op brings. You're coming out of having no experience in the industry, and you're expected to do a lot of, or hope to be expected to do a lot of the same work that other people are doing with that fresh set of eyes. So ask questions, have people explain the most basic things so that A, you understand it, and B, so that they have to kind of think about how to present it to someone who hasn't experienced before. A lot of times that's very helpful for them. So even more of a reason to ask questions and to be curious. So not only do you ask questions about things that are pertinent to your role, but if something comes up that's a little bit farther out, ask someone to explain it. Get more information about the context of everything and dig in. At least in my industry, a lot of what I do is problem solving, and the biggest piece is finding the problems to solve. So I work at a hospital right now, and I'm working on a specific task, and someone brings up something else that's really annoying. It's helpful to be curious about that annoyance to figure out if it's another problem that maybe I can make a project around and solve. So that curiosity is very helpful in setting yourself up for success. Another really important thing is to admit mistakes. You're a co-op, you're going to make mistakes. It's something that's inevitable. Even as a full-time employee, you're going to make mistakes as a worker. So being able to react to those mistakes is way more important than avoiding them in the first place. That's important, but nevertheless, the way to do that is to just explain it quickly. So when you make the escape, acknowledge it, tell the people that it affects immediately, and try to figure out how to solve it. Being honest is just way more helpful, and it's going to make you look a lot better as a performer. And then lastly, take notes and follow up. Throughout the entire experience, you're going to be given a lot of information. Write it down. At least for me, I have a horrible memory, so like having everything written down is super, super helpful. And then following up is also important, because people are going to throw ideas at you because your new eyes, they're going to just like throw things at you. Follow up with those things. If someone mentions something offhand, send them an email later and ask about it, and maybe that'll bring up a great opportunity for you to work on it, or even just to learn more. And that way people will know that they can trust you to try new things.
And then lastly, the development piece is really, really important. You're all seeking out an internship experience or seeking to have interns in your organization, because those students, the younger generation of engineers, are trying to learn and develop themselves in a variety of areas. For those that are going into an internship experience, I think something important to keep in mind is trying to build your portfolio and your resume in real time. And so portfolio building is kind of just collecting some details about your projects. If your employer allows that, sharing of materials and such. And so at the end of your experience, or nearing the end of your experience, kind of looking over a collection of work product that you've done, and pursuing if you are able to take some of that away that you would be able to present in your portfolio moving forward. The resume, you get out of those specific confidential potential details, and you can feel free to build your resume in real time, because if you go another 6 months or a year without looking at your resume after your co-op, it's going to be more difficult for you to form really actionable bullet points for your resume. And so keeping it fresh, I like to do it along the way, and just continue to build solid bullet points that I can pull on when I need to look for a new job or opportunity. I think another thing too, as engineers, we should always be keeping our eye out for is identifying skills or tools or software that the department or organization is currently using that you may be able to pick up and gain additional experience. So one of my experiences, they were big users of Minitab, and so I was able to gain some additional applied skills in Minitab that I didn't get in my coursework. My company right now, we do a lot of soft skill development, and so seeking out opportunities to work on your work personality and your performance in those soft skill areas is also something unique that would just make you a stronger full-time employee if you gain some of that during an internship experience. And then lastly, setting SMART goals to work with while you are on your experience. And so perhaps some of this goal setting even comes about when you're assessing the value that you want out of your next experience that you're seeking out. And so thinking about what are the sort of goals that you would like to obtain. And then sharing it with your advisor or your boss so that they can help you to achieve those very specific metrics that you are looking to improve about yourself. And so with that, that concludes our presentation. And like I said, we're happy to have people come off camera and be engaged. And I'm not sure if we got any questions in the chat.
Thank you very much, Anne-Marie and Christopher. We're now going to begin answering questions submitted during today's presentation. As a reminder, you can still submit questions through the chat. So we have one question from Yasim Sirali. The question is, Anne-Marie mentioned students starting their own startups. Could you provide a few examples on how they go about setting those up and what the trends are in terms of the areas they go for?
Sure. I'm happy to pop in here first. So I have a good friend who during graduate school was approached by another student, and they kind of came together and formed a startup that was focused on unique ways of obtaining scholarships. So they were partnering with organizations, companies. They did some creative type competitions so that they were forming opportunities for scholarships outside of the typical essay. I know that many engineering colleges at universities are starting to build out entrepreneurship tracks or programs. Northeastern has many resources for entrepreneurship. I think perhaps being in the Boston area where this is a startup city. And so both in the College of Engineering and the university in general, there's two different very strong entrepreneurship streams that support students with funding, advisors, mentorship in industry, and connections also to local venture capitalism and all of that. And so if that doesn't exist for your university, but you are interested in entrepreneurship, seeking out an opportunity to build that program up at your university, or if that's not an option, looking into your local communities for companies or groups of folks that may be able to help advise and give additional resources to you in your startup journey. And the only other thing I have to say about startups is that I know a lot of students that sort of utilize each other in building their startup team. And so seeking out your own student network to be able to see what skills and friends you have to be able to make sure you cover different scopes of work for the startup you're looking to start. Anything to add, Chris? Do you have any friends with startup experience?
I think I have one that was more of like continuously working on a plan throughout his time, but he was able to continue to like do other internships and kind of do that part-time. So it's also an option. Other than that, I don't know if I have much experience or knowledge about that.
The next question is from Sandish Enakonda, and the question is, what skills do you suggest engineering management graduate students build upon for internships?
I'll take it since Chris technically doesn't have an EM degree, but he might have some insights after I kind of spew off a couple of things. I think what I learned in my engineering management courses, what I took from it most specifically was the project management skills, sort of the hard project management skills in terms of like the technical engineering concepts there around work planning and coordination. I think when I think about the engineering management book of knowledge put out by the society, there are a lot of very, very relevant topics that I've experienced throughout my time in engineering courses and not necessarily all within my EM degree. So I think that, connecting with the MBOC or with obtaining one of those certifications would definitely allow you to gain a lot of skills and understanding the body of knowledge of engineering management in more detail and what sort of themes you may see in seeking out an engineering management related experience. I think one thing in reflecting from my graduate student peers during grad school was that many were seeking very specific applications. So they came to get their EM degree, but specifically to apply to supply chain management or specifically to apply to a data analytics type role. And so if you are that type of student that is seeking out something in particular in an industry, a role, an application, etc., kind of just tapping into what industry best practices are. If you're an IT person, agile is the big thing versus if you're in ops, you're more of a lean focused person. And so just kind of, exploring that and thinking of other opportunities offline that relate to what you're trying to seek out.
Yeah, I couldn't have said it better myself. One thing I've noticed is, some of what I do kind of relates to engineering management a little bit. And like my current role is in a department, it's the Enterprise Project Management Office. So I'm like working for a project management office, not as a project manager, but as part of a team that champions a lot of those actions. So we're trying to implement Agile and even though I'm not a project manager, I'm still involved in getting that team working in that manner. So if you're looking for specific skills, try to find a team that, uses those skills so that when you're looking for, a project management role, you can say, oh, I've been on a team that uses Agile. I've kind of worked to develop this Agile program. So exactly what Annmarie said, look to use the skills that you would hope to champion as a project manager.
Thank you. The next question is from Alex Sushko. And the question is, what advice do you have for starting a new position within a company after being promoted from an hourly role to a salaried role?
That's interesting. I think, Chris, sorry, I popped in here.
Go for it.
You can come after if you have anything additional to add. So Alex, I think that's really interesting. In my role managing the co-ops, we have had some co-ops, come back and try to seek out if there are full-time positions. And we have had discussions about how to navigate that and how we might be able to work with those students who were always seen as interns to be able to grow and make sure that they feel comfortable in their new role, becoming a more full-time salaried employee. And so I think, if you have developed a lot of relationships throughout your part-time experience, connecting with those folks and letting them know that you have more time or additional scope of work, or that you have, however your job may have changed as a result, so that they're clear of the expectations, so they'll perhaps give you more challenging assignments that allow you to grow past the part-time intern and into a full-time position. I think, taking advantage of that, I think one of the things that we all at Northeastern, a lot of us come to Northeastern because we would like to find our future employer by one of our co-op organizations. And so it's great that you've been able to convert that into a longer term experience for yourself. Anything to add, Chris?
No, the closest, I have not had that experience per se, so I'm glad you jumped in. The closest thing I was going to say is that when I was developing my co-op at the company in Berlin, it was that they definitely did not have a co-op program or even a position for an industrial engineer. So one of the things that I thought was really helpful was just I had to really know what value I would bring, because one of the questions when I was talking to them is like, what would you do for us? Like, what would you do? So really knowing what my value is and where my skill set is and how it would apply to that company is super important, because they're going to want to know that. And you're going to want to be able to sell that to your employer. So just advice.
The next question is from me. So during your presentation, you gave several tips on how to increase one's chances of getting an internship. What would you consider the most important or the two most important things that to do to increase one's chances of getting an internship?
So one of the things I think we touched on informational interviewing, I think networking is super important. Being able to talk to people and reach out to people is very, very helpful. I think, I don't know the statistic, Annmarie might mention it, but there's more roles are kind of created or employed from networking than there is from just like cold applications. So even though, I applied to my current role through Northeastern's portal, I reached out to Annmarie about the industry, and she knew someone who works in the role in the department I was applying to. So I then reached out to that person, and then she talked to me about the role, and I learned about like what values that department has, and then my name was already in there in the department. So it was very, very helpful. So I think that's one of the most important things you can do if possible. And then the second one, I think, would just be practicing when it comes to like the interview process. The more experience you have doing that, the better chances you're going to have. So practice and preparation, I think, are super important within the interview itself.
Yeah, if I can add in a little bit more detail to that Chris has alluded to with the networking and the informational interviewing is, directly the path that he's kind of laid out for you all, looking into your alumni networks and folks, second degree connections, etc., is really important. But the more important thing in that process is that note that you send over that Chris kind of outlined. He gave some really good tips about what to say and how to say it. If I tend to get a lot of just general alumni requests that either don't come with a note or come with something so generic that I have no idea what that person is seeking out of me. And for me, I tend to want to only connect with people that I can actually, call upon when I need them on LinkedIn. And so if LinkedIn is your approach, just being very thoughtful in how you approach networking with others. I think during the pandemic, less of the in-person networking events have happened. Perhaps when we get back to a little bit more normal, utilizing Meetup, it's an app that kind of has networking in your area by a specific industry or by a specific interest group is really important, and trying to seek out those opportunities that may be virtual up until this point. Over the past year, I found a local organization to just connect with and learn from others in my industry. The only other thing I was going to add here was that, and I thought I had a slide on it, but I guess I must have deleted it at some point was just that there are so many mediums to obtain a job via the web. But many studies have shown that a very small percentage will obtain jobs out of Indeed.com, Monster.com. Even the LinkedIn job board are less effective than utilizing a direct connection through networking or connections that your university may have set up already.
We have another question from Yasim Sireli. The question is, what is the most effective way to explain what engineering management or systems engineering is to employers? Still to this day, some students have a hard time with it since we operate in an interdisciplinary area.
I'll take that. I mean, I tend to not, personally, I tend to focus more on my systems engineering. And I do have a technique for explaining that to the layman who has no idea what an industrial engineer is, where I sort of go through, we're not the type of engineer that designs or builds a structure, and we're not really the type that designs a product or something that moves. We're not designing circuit boards, but what we are doing is designing and improving processes. I think that a lot of that can translate over into engineering management because of the elements of systems engineering within. And I think the way that you can sell engineering management, if it's a graduate degree, if it's a secondary degree to your specialty, is that you've just gained additional business experience that allows you to have a different lens on working in an engineering role.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think another thing that helps is just making sure that whatever, it's good to have that, prepared kind of explanation, and then being able to then adapt that to the specific audience because it changes a lot. So knowing exactly what they're looking for and making sure to tweak what your explanation is to fit their industry or their role is super important and challenging. So when you say like the best way, I don't know if I could tell you that, but that helps, I think.
Definitely. A couple of options in your back pocket.
Mm-hmm.
It looks like we've covered all the questions. Thank you, Annmarie and Christopher, for a great presentation. It was a pleasure to have you with us. I would also like to thank Dr. Yasim Sireli for helping with the webinar today. Yasim is the ASEM Secretary and an ASEM Webinar Committee member. On behalf of ASEM, thank you all for joining us today and have a great rest of your day.
Thank you so much.
Bye. Thank you.
Thank you.